I'm going to show you how to use a traditional basket making technique to start creating a form with the reed. I've taken my reed and I cut it into 12-inch pieces. I have 7 12-inch pieces and then one long piece of reed. It's been sitting in the water for about 10 minutes. When it sits in the water, it softens the reed and makes it more pliable so it doesn't break as you're working with it. I'm going to take both bundles and fold them in half to find the center of the bundles. So first I want to make sure the ends are lined up, and then I fold them in half to find the center. The stack of 3 pieces are going to go vertical on top of the 4. And I want to make sure that each of the sticks is laid out flat. Now I'm going to take this long piece that I'll call the weaver, diagonal across the intersection of the 3 and the 4 pieces of reed. So I'm going to have a tail about 3 inches long, and I'm holding this all between my thumb and my finger. So you can see there are 3 layers of material that I'm holding together. And I'll take this weaver and pull it into that corner and then straight down underneath the 4 pieces of reed. Now it goes into the corner, and every time I get to a corner I want to kind of pull it diagonal to make sure that it's really tight and secure. Now it's going over the top 3 and over this tail here. I'm just pretending like the tail is not there. So I go into that corner and you can see I'm pulling it diagonal to tighten it, and then I go straight up to the top left corner. And now I pull it diagonal to the bottom right corner and then over. And pulling it diagonal just really tightens that bundle. So you can see here I have I wrapped around 1 time and I'm going clockwise around. Now I'm going to do this 3 times where I wrap this weaver around the bundles in the same direction. So one thing to pay attention to, I have the 3 reeds on top of the 4, and I'm going over the 3, so it pulls it down to the under layer of the 4. And when I get to the 4, I go underneath it so that can pull it up to the 3. So it's really securing these in place. And as I do this around 3 times, you can see that instead of putting the reed on top of the next piece, I'm putting it just above it. So it's nice and tight, and it also aesthetically looks nice. But if it goes on top of it and it slips off at some point, you're going to have a loose connection. So you really want to make sure that you stack it as you're going. Instead of putting it on top, you stack it going vertical and horizontal. So now I've wrapped it around 3 times, and I'm going to go around and separate these spokes into 2 pieces. And the first one, I'm going to go into a pattern and go under and over. So you can see at the beginning I went under these 4, over the 3, under the 4, over the 3. And this is going to be a theme through this basket, or the form that we're making is over, under, over, under. So if you've gone under before, you want to go over the next time. So I go under these 2 pieces, and then I go over the next 2. Now I'm turning my basket as I work on it because it's easier for me to keep it straight up and down. And now I have these 3 spokes here, so I'm going to separate 2, and as I separate them, I'm pulling them over to the left. My goal is to get these all splayed out. Instead of having an X or a cross, I want it to be more like a sunshine or a spider. So now I go underneath those 2 spokes, and when I have 1 spoke left, but I'm going to pull another one from this bundle. And I'm just going to put that tail on the inside there. And later I'll trim the tail down. I just have to pretend like it's not here. So I'm going over those 2, and they're a little bit split apart right now, but the next time they'll get closer together. And now I have 3. And also, as I go under and over, I want to really make sure that I tighten it up too. So just like when I was going in the corners, every time there's a gap between the two, I want to pull it so it's tight. Now I have one spoke left, so I'm going to pull one from this last bundle, and I go over the two, and you can see here, I'm taking that reed and pulling it here, and now I go under, and I'm back to where I started. So now this is the second pass around, and you can see I went under last time, and I'm going over this time. So it's not only the step before where I went under here, also the step in the row before. So everything is going to be opposite. If I went under before, I'm going over now. And if you see that pattern is broken, you need to figure out where you took a wrong turn. So I'm going under and then over. So these are the two that are together. You can see they're getting closer together, that I had to pull from another bundle. And the same right here. So I'm just going around, under and over. And as you get used to it, you can start going faster, but you see my finger is guiding this into the plate, into the gap, and then over here. And my hand is pulling at the same time, so I'm keeping tension, and that's what's holding this all together. And as I go, if I want to start having these spokes curve, all I need to do as I'm going is hold them down. So each time I hold it into place, and curve around. I'm putting another piece of reed in case this one's going to run out soon. And so I need to get another one that's wet. And as you're working, if your material is starting to get really dry and you see it starting to crack, just throw it back in the water. So if I need to put it in the water now, I would just put it down like that, walk away for a few minutes, and come back and pick it up to start working again. If you have material that's thicker than this, you would soak it longer. Thinner material needs less soaking. And the material I'm working with right now is called round reed. There's also half oval and flat reed. So you can see now I'm starting to get pretty big gaps that I'm weaving between my spokes. At this point, I'm going to separate the two spokes so I have more spokes to weave around. So I'm going to get back to where I started, right here. So now instead of weaving with two of them together, I'm separating them. So I'm going over one and under the next one. And then I go to the next set of spokes. Over and under. And again, over. And see, as I go over, I'm not just going over and under. I'm going over and in between the two. I'm really pushing and pulling at the same time. And under. Otherwise, you're going to have a gap in your material. Over and under. And it also won't be as secure because it's not woven tightly. Okay, so I'm at where I started, so I go over and under, and now I'm back to where I just split them and started weaving. And you can see if I keep going, instead of having the opposite where it goes under instead of over, it's going over again. That's because when I split them and I had two, I created an even number instead of an odd number. And if I'm weaving in a circle, I need an odd number to keep that pattern going. So right here on the very last one, instead of splitting these two spokes, I'm going to weave over both of them together. So now I'm treating these like they're one. Later I'll cut one off and pull it out, but I want to secure the basket first before I do that. So by creating an odd number and weaving two together, I'm back to the pattern that I need to be at, where every other one is over and then under. So you can see I'm about to run out of my weaver. If you're about to run out of material, a couple inches before you run out, add another piece and hold on to it and just start weaving with it together. And that will hold it in place. And then once I get to the place where it has run out, I just leave it on the inside of the basket and keep weaving. So I'm back to the place where I have the two treated as one, and you can see that keeps my pattern of going over and under in opposite ways. And now that I've woven these two together for quite a while, I'm going to take my scissors and just clip it off. So now I just have one. So I have several inches left on the spokes, and I'm going to show you how to finish this off so that it stays nice and tight and nothing comes apart. I'm just going to finish weaving this weaver in. And I'm putting that on the inside of my basket. I want to soak the spokes before I start finishing because I'm going to use those to weave inside of the basket. So I'm going to leave it for about 5 to 10 minutes, get them nice and wet so they don't break as I work with them. So my spokes have been soaking for about 10 minutes, and now I'm going to show you how to finish. So I start with one of the spokes, and I'm going to weave them in to finish them. So I look at what happened here. The last weaver went over this and then went under the weaver or the spoke to the right. So I'm going to the right, and instead of going under this spoke, and you can see right here, this weaver went under that spoke. Instead of going under it with this spoke, I'm going over it, then under the next one, and then I want to go over and down into this weaving. And because I've woven so tightly, it can be a little tricky to get your spoke down. And if you squeeze towards each other, sometimes it's a little bit easier. So I just go through 2 or 3 of these woven areas and keep pushing, and then I'm going to pull this spoke. I don't want to tighten it yet because eventually this is going to weave in, and so I want to have room to tighten it later. The tail that we first started with is getting in my way, so I'm just going to clip that off right now. I also have a tail from the weaver when I replaced it and added a new one, and I'll clip that off also. So I just wove this spoke to the right. Now I'm going to the next one. So you can see this spoke went under the spoke to the right. I'm going to go over and then under, and now over this spoke. So I'm just doing 3 patterns with this where I go over, under, over. I'm going to go through this basket, and I'm just going to try to go down 2. So right here, this is, you can see it's really soft on the end. I'm just going to clip it off so I have a clean cut. I want to make sure it's not too short that I can't actually use it, but this will be much easier now. So I just have to finagle it in. Actually, I can take one of my dowel rods to create some space if I need to. Okay, so here we go. So I want to make sure I just went here, came from this spoke, now I'm going to the next one. It gets a little bit confusing because there are so many things going on here. So I want to go over, under, over. So this whole finishing process is going to have the same pattern where I go over, under, over. Stick it through, and I'm just sticking it through 2 different woven pieces. And I can start pulling them all down just a little bit. But I still want to leave some space for finishing later when I have my get to the very end. So over, under, over. So now I'm starting to pull all of these so they go in the right direction. This one I'm going through 3 because this is the top of the weaver and it's a little bit looser. So now I have my next one, so it's starting to get pulled over by the other ones. So I want to make sure that it comes around and goes over, under, over. And I'm going to pull all of these down. As I go, I'm slowly tightening everything. And you can see it's all starting to pull the spokes where they need to be. So this one also, I'm going to put into 3, and I have one of these dowels that's a little bit stiffer that can help me move things around. There we go, that really loosened it up. So now you can see here I have this spoke that's starting to get pulled over from the other ones. And I want it to first go over, under, and then over this last one here. And I have this weaver here that I'm just letting be where it is. So now I have this other spoke. You can see it's starting to get pulled, but I've got to move all these over. So it has to go over this spoke, then under, and then over the next one. but I need to pull some of these down to make space for it. So it goes over this last spoke, and then I'm putting it down into the weaving. So now over, under, over. This spoke goes down into the weaving. Over. So you can see this spoke here, over the next one, under, over, and then down. So I'm just going to go back and tighten everything a little bit. So you slowly want to tighten everything. So that one, you can see it goes over the other one. Nope, it's going in the wrong pattern. So over, under, over, and down in here. And now before I finish the last few spokes, because I'm really going to have to push and pull, I'm going to soak it so everything is really pliable, because my reed is starting to dry out. So I have 3 more to weave. I'm going to let it soak for a little bit, and then I'll finish it. My basket's been soaking for about 10 minutes, and I'm going to finish now with the last 3 pieces of the spokes that need to be woven into the basket. So again, I start going over and under, and then over the last one. So this is where it gets a little bit tricky. This one has already been woven, so I have to go over it, and this is why I'm leaving some space as I weave. So I have to go over and down, even though it's already been woven. Again here, over, and now I need to go under this spoke that's already woven. So I take my reed and go under, and now I need to go over and down. So you can see why it's important to have quite a bit of space left that's not woven onto your spokes so that you can maneuver it around. And I'll go through and tighten some of this up. So here's my last one. And now I want it to go over this spoke here, under the next one. So I'm going to slide it here. Now it needs to go under this spoke here. So at this point I'm paying attention to the spokes and where they come out. And now I'm going to have it go over this third spoke and down into the weave structure. And that's my final spoke. Now that they're all woven in, I can start pulling them. So I'm just going around the basket and I'm pulling to tighten everything. And it'll take me a couple times going around the basket to really tighten everything. And now I'm just holding it and pulling down. So a really simple way of finishing a basket. Instead of weaving like this, when I had a spoke coming up, I could just go next door to the next spoke and stick it down 3 or 4 of the weave patterns and pull it out. But this is much more secure than that. And now you can see I have this extra weaver here that I'm just going to trim off. That's at the very end. And now I'm going to go around and trim all of these off. So I'm getting really close to the area that they came out of the basket, but I'm really careful not to cut the actual woven pieces. And if you're weaving something bigger, you can pull those spokes on the inside instead of the outside, so when you trim them, it's less visible. But this is so small that I wouldn't have space to pull it very well, very tight, if it were on the inside. Be real careful to keep your fingers away as you're clipping this, because the material is hard to clip and you don't want to slip and clip your fingers. And now I have a finished basketry form. So as you're weaving, if you wanted to go out further, you would just direct your spokes out as you're weaving. If you want them to curve more, you can curve it more. And if you have more material, you can make it larger, but this is a small one right now.